Welcome to Dan's Talks. My guest today is Richard Wiese, who is the president of the Explorers Club, which is a club based in New York City, I believe, but actually deals with people all over the world who are the members who travel everywhere and climb things and swim through things and meet with penguins and whatever else. We're going to talk about all that. This is his third time around. He's been president and then left, I guess, to go somewhere, and then came back and became president and then left to go somewhere. And now this is the third time he was just elected. Um, First of all, tell us a little bit about the club and a little bit about I'm in East Hampton and your familiarity with our end of the world here. Have you ever explored out here?
Hey Dan, good to see you again. You and I have known each other a long time, probably I'd say at least 30 years, mostly from, I think originally from softball. And so the Explorers Club is a club that started in 1904. And at that time, it was all guys trying to be the first ones to the North Pole and to the South Pole. And since that time in 1904, our members are the first person to the North Pole, South Pole, on top of Everest, first on the moon, first to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And so it's, it's literally an organization that people sit on rockets, stand on mountains, and as you said earlier, talk to penguins, I guess.
It must be quite something that people come back to New York in particular and speak about their travels. That must be the whole point of it. Where's the club located?
The club is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan on 70th between Park and Madison. And you're right, it has been a gathering places. I always like to say when you walk into the Explorers Club, it's like Harry Potter's Hogwarts for adults, where people talk about magic. I remember the first time I walked in there in the mid 1980s, and I could overhear in the members lounge some guy talking about Amazonian spear tips. Another guy had talked about had been in space. And, at that point, I knew I had found my tribe. This was a people that really interest me. And, it's kind of like herding cats. It's a very alpha individualistic group. But man, are there some interesting people walking around.
In what way was it that you found your tribe?
Well, so one of the things I liked best about New York City when I moved into there out of college was that you could find experts speaking on any subject. I used to go to Carnegie Hall for lectures, the Lincoln Center, and I'd hear people from all different walks of life. But I'd always been, my father was an airline pilot, and so I traveled a lot around the world. He took me to climb Mount Kilimanjaro when I was 11 years old. And one of the things about the Explorers Club, if I just even mentioned something like Kilimanjaro, the general response would be, oh, did you take the Mashami route? Did you take this route or that route? And so there's this element of knowing. Someone just, in fact, today contacted me about a trip to Antarctica. And I said, oh, you're probably going through Ushuaia, Drake Passage, Antarctic Peninsula. You probably stop on Elephant Island. And so there's that knowing, when people within any industry speak, there's something really wonderful. If you speak with other writers, there's a language writers speak. And so I think when I said I found my tribe, it was other people who were doing those kind of things. Some of them were my childhood heroes, like the Apollo astronauts or Sir Edmund Hillary, or Jane Goodall. These are all people I've gotten to meet.
Had you done other than travel around with your dad when you were growing up? Did you do any kind of exploring at that time as well?
My exploration, I was lucky that I had two really good mentors in my life, maybe three. I had my father, who was the first man to solo the Pacific Ocean in an airplane. I had my mother's brother, who was the head of MIT's nuclear engineering department, Dr. Richard Lanza, who was always available to me. And then I had one of my sisters had dated somebody from our local town on Long Island's conservation department, a diver, and this guy took me out when I was a teenager out diving with him. We put up the first artificial reef in the Long Island Sound that had ever been done. And so at a very early age, it sort of builds. There's a saying that people always say, "Oh, how can I be a oceanographer or this or that?" And there's a famous explorer, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who says, if you hang around the action long enough, you become part of the action. And for me, I was always happy to paint boats, clean up garbage, carry bags, whatever it was to get on an expedition or trip. And it just sort of snowballed to where I remember one year waking up close to the North Pole. I'd just been skiing there. And I'd also just been to the Everest region and also on Kilimanjaro. And I remember waking up one morning and it literally took me 5 seconds to remember where I was. I was like, where am I again? And so, um, I'm not a glutton for punishment, but it's such an addictive thing. Once you see or experience or part of certain expeditions, you want to be part of more. And there's kind of a saying my wife has, you can do well by doing good. And so when you're in a position to work on something that betters the human condition, explains things better to people, then you feel like you're in a very fortunate position.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born on Long Island. Took me a long time to get rid of the accent. Um, I grew up on the Stony Brook Harbor, and that's on the North Shore of Long Island. And where I lived in a town called Head of the Harbor at that time was just a lot of big plots of land, 50 acres, 100 acres. We lived right on the Stony Brook Harbor, which was a really pretty pristine harbor. And this was my backyard. There weren't a lot of kids, but man, I'd be out there with my dog, you know, down digging for clams, for oysters. I'd go, with a kitchen glove diving for lobsters. And so I was just always in it. And, as I said, I was really fortunate. I grew up with a family, a mother and a father who were able to expose me to things. And I just feel like I had a very fortunate childhood that led to an education at Brown University, where I was a science major. And just there's a lot of things in my life that, in retrospect, I'm very fortunate to have those people who have created the building blocks.
When did you begin coming out east to the Hamptons, and what did you do in the exploring that was involved out here?
Well, I started going to the Hamptons in the 1960s. And I remember specifically Amagansett, where it would be homes along the ocean and then just potato fields, or even, the sod farms that would be before you got to the Hamptons. And so, one of my fondest memories as a kid is I was, just playing on the beach, with my parent, and my parents were there, my sisters. And I remember finding a whale's rib just on the beach. I thought it was driftwood, and it was this 8 foot curved object, and it was, from a whale, just a reminder of what's offshore there. So I've spent a lot of time out east. Um, most of that was from a sociological perspective as a single guy dating in the Hamptons during the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. That's no longer a part of my life, that aspect. But I definitely appreciate the Hamptons for not only a beautiful place, but it was a fun place when I was young and single.
You still have a place? Do you have a place to come out here? Do you visit friends or?
No, unfortunately, my parents, they had lived in their home again out east for 60 years, and they both have passed in the last couple of years. And so, I don't come out as often as I used to. You know, I'm I'm married, have kids. Probably my kids would like to start going out there. And then there's aspects of the Hamptons that have changed, I feel, that make it less attractive to me now.
Um, I think that's very true. I go back to the 50s, but you
Don't
don't
you
know.
wish you would have bought a lot of land back then, Dan?
I remember where the the free life balloon attempt was made. You probably remember that as well, where this couple decided they wanted to fly a balloon uh, across from a farm field in Springs to Ireland. And they left. I remember being on the site. You could see forever all the way to the harbor about 5 miles away. And they didn't make it. It was a tragedy in the end. And but I was out there not long ago, and it's all overgrown. You can't see 5 feet, and so there's so much growth and change, particularly in the vegetation, and of course also in who comes out there. I've had a theory that the vegetation has come from the wealthy bringing in giant trees, and maybe there's something to it.
Well, well, I mean, there is global climate change undeniably. And, what happens is when people build homes, they bring in beautiful trees that are theoretically invasive to an area. And so I would imagine that the biggest change is the lack of migratory paths in the Hamptons, right? There's more things that have fences and animals. Maybe you'll have more deer, less coyote. It's constantly evolving, but it's still a beautiful place. Look, um, if I could afford a place on the ocean there, man, I would be there.
Where are you based now in this city, Manhattan?
No, I'm based in Connecticut. I live in Weston, Connecticut, um, which is kind of similar to the Hamptons in that it's a place that a lot of artists used to live between Westport and Weston. You had Paul Newman living here, Robert Redford. I know that Keith Richards lives in my town right now. Frank Sinatra had a house just down the river from me. So it has that same similar feeling in sort of an agrarian past with artists around it.
What does your job do? How do you spend your time as president?
Shaking my head. Explorers are like herding cats. They're alpha individuals. No, so my overall perspective on exploration is I am trying to include as many explorers from different countries, walks of life. I'm trying to get them all under the same tent. For many years, at least in the United States, it seems like the perspective of exploration was just, dudes who looked like me and you. And I think that there's many people who are able to explain the world around them. And, I would like to give them a platform to do that.
There any particular place in your travels that it stands out as something quite remarkable, more so than other place?
What ultimately what I've noticed with travel in general, it's generally not the place you were, it's the people you meet along the way. If somebody went to Paris and they had a great romance, the Eiffel Tower might be the backdrop, but you're going to remember the romance. Um, my wife is from South Africa, so that place always plays a big role in my mind. I like South Africa because I find there's just so many incredibly creative people who create so much out of so little. I like the message post Mandela that the past is past and we're moving on with our future. I've spent a lot of time in the Azores of recent, and I can't believe these beautiful islands are such a short flight from us. I can't believe Americans haven't discovered Morocco because it's super exotic and it's closer than England is. I think some of our US national parks are just stunning. Um, I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro 18 times. So the Maasai people, the Chaga, so many of the guides I've met on that mountain sort of stick out in my mind. I once lived in Hawaii, which I think is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. So, Dan, it's such a big world and it's so hard. Like you could say, where's your best animal experience? Where is your most exotic place? I mean, there's just so many categories.
Yeah, among the places that you mentioned, I've been to about half. I've traveled a great deal. And early on with the paper, it pretty much closed up in winter. So I'd take 4 months and go to Tenerife or Maui or south of France. It was really nice. It's a good
You, when I
way.
was a kid, my dad worked for Pan Am. He was a pilot there. And so I had free airline tickets. And so I remember in the 1980s, I'd literally on a Thursday evening fly to West Africa. It was generally Liberia. Sometimes it was Senegal. It's about an 8 or 9 hour flight. I'd be there for Friday, stay at a hotel right close to the airport by the beach. And then I'd come home on Sunday. And it was literally cheaper for me to go to West Africa for a weekend than it was to go skiing in Vermont.
That's quite something. I also spent a lot of time in not a lot of time, but in South Africa at the Table Mountain in Johannesburg and down on the island of prison. Been out there.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Um, it's quite. What is? Tell us about this week at the Explorers Club. What are things happening there?
Well, every Monday night they do public lectures, which that's how I first found the Explorers Club. And that's open to the public. And you can go online and you can see their schedule. And then, I'm busy putting together something called the Global Exploration Summit. The last few years, we've done it in Portugal. I'm in talks with India, Qatar, Egypt. Where else am I talking about doing it? I did an Oceans Week in Monaco last March with Prince Albert. Many of our members are involved in SpaceX and a Blue Origin. So there's always people are going on those type of trips. And then, the vast majority of our explorers are oceanographers. They're people looking to solve microplastics. There's climatologists. I mean, you just name the subject. And I think maybe the biggest controversy in exploration these days is who is an explorer and who gets to describe the world. And I think that the basis, what you're finding is that it's not just people with PhDs, but it's also artists and writers and um, maybe even music. These are all, there's between, I think, 5 and 6 thousand languages spoken on Earth. Yet there's universal languages, the ones I just mentioned, food, music, art, dance. And that's another way in which people universally describe the world around them.
What's the most recent event at the Explorers Club that was open to the public?
Uh, what's the last one I went to? I don't even know what I did yesterday. I have 3 kids in high school, and all I know is that I uh, had pickup number drive the kids and their fellow basketball players to practice. Someone else drove them home. I made dinner. I got up this morning at 5:30, let the dog out, fed the cats, got the kids up, got them off to school, took the dog for a walk. So I'm so bad at remembering things just last week. I know that my wife is over winter break going to South Africa to see her mother with my daughter. I'm going to Chamonix with my boys to go skiing. And what we're doing after that, I'd have to look at a date book.
Are you athletic in any particular sports?
I used to be. It's like everybody else. You used to be. You've seen me play softball there, Dan. So
Yeah.
I've I've done that, but the vast majority of my athleticism is taking a year and a half old golden retriever on long walks, and so I'm fortunate that I have miles and miles of trails in the woods, and many of them the dog can go off leash. So just before this podcast, I was on a 5 mile walk with my dog, and I think that's all the exercise I need for today.
I would absolutely agree. And I thank you for being on the podcast. This was very interesting and very exciting. And
Thank you. It's so good to see a familiar face that has brought so much to the East End of Long Island. So thank you for having me as a guest.